Hello and welcome to today's Marketing Sherpa webinar. Today we're going to be looking back at Email Summit and bringing you the top takeaways from these award-winning campaigns. So first I want to thank ExactTarget for sponsoring today's webinar and making it free. And actually just saw some research from ExactTarget that 98% of marketers plan to increase or maintain their spend in 2014. So marketers got some good budgets. Let's give them some tactics to spend those budgets on. I'm Daniel Burstein, Director of Editorial Content here at Mech Labs. Joining me today in our studios in Jacksonville, Florida, we have Courtney Eckerly, a Manager of Editorial Content. Thanks for joining us, Courtney.
You're welcome, Dan.
Courtney's not just a manager, but she is also the lead reporter for our email marketing beats. She's got a lot of knowledge to bring. Of course, not all of the knowledge comes from this side of the microphone and the camera. We want to hear what you have to say too. You can use hashtag SherpaWebinar, share your questions, also share your own takeaways from Email Summit. I'm sure we have many attendees on the line today. So Email Summit 2014, that's what we're going to be talking about. And we're going to have a lot of extra content. We're going to be tweeting through hashtag SherpaWebinar as well. A lot of the things we're going to talk about today, Courtney's reported on, has written case studies on them. Other reporters have. We have previous webinars we did. So there's a lot more information behind what we're going to talk about you can find on hashtag SherpaWebinar. But let's start with a choice for you, the marketer. Marketing is about choice. Tara, if we could launch that poll. Here is the challenge we face today together. We only have 30 minutes. We have 158 slides because we had 14 and a half hours of content from Email Summit to choose from. There was a lot to pick from. So we want to give you the opportunity. Do you want us to go fast and furious, get through as much as we can? We'll hit on a lot of different tips and tactics, and maybe you walk away with one or two that works for you. Or should we go slow and steady, get a few things, go a little deeper into them? Again, we have 30 minutes because we're very respectful of your time as well, and we don't want to take up too much of your time. So let's close out that poll, Tara, and see what people said. So it looks like a 77-23 split is what I'm seeing, that people want us to go fast and furious. Is that correct? It looks like it. All right, well, let's just jump into it then. Let's take a look at our first case study, our first lesson. And the beginning is based on a question we have here from Debbie. She's a digital program manager. She says, in addition to the top takeaways, where would you start if you wanted to implement that takeaway? So let's start at the beginning. This is a marketer who attended Email Summit 2013 and specifically took away something he learned there and just totally changed how Whirlpool approached email marketing, a giant brand like that. So let's look at what happened. The click-through rate was going up. The opt-outs were going down for Thomas Mender of Whirlpool. But then something scary kind of happened right there. The opt-outs were getting higher than the click-through rate. Things weren't working. He faced a challenge. And as you see in many movies, when our hero faced a challenge, they go on a journey. And his journey took him to Email Summit 2013. And there he learned a key lesson. Let's take a look at an experiment he launched based on that lesson. This is what he was running before, right? He had, as you can see, there's the top and the bottom of the email, a lot of calls to action. He had 4 calls to action in that email. He learned at Email Summit 2013, only ask people to do one thing in your email, in your promotional emails. It doesn't work for every email. So he decided he'd launch a test. You can see the control, 4 calls to action, the treatment, 1 call to action. He got a 42% increase in click-through rate. So if you're looking for a takeaway from today that you can put into action, I think that question was from Debbie, take a look at your emails. How many calls to action do you have? And test. Again, he didn't just launch it and just believe everything from Email Summit 2013, as you shouldn't just believe everything that we tell you today. Even if it's a best practice, it's a best practice because it probably works for 87% of marketers, not 100%. So he tested it, and he saw it worked for him. He had a 42% increase in click-through. But that's not really the big takeaway from this story. The big takeaway is how it changed the process that Whirlpool used for their email marketing. So as you can see here, this was the current process. They were under the gun. They were busy like many marketers are. The agency built that creative, they had a super quick turnaround to approve it, and boom, they sent it out to the customer. But here was the big change. They changed their process to learn about the customer. So what he was really doing with that test he launched wasn't just to see which calls to action worked better. He wanted to start a new process in his company. He learned a lot at Email Summit, and he wanted to see how can he take it back. He knew he couldn't just make a lot of changes right away. He knew he had a lot of processes already set up, but that one test allowed him to show, hey, if we take a different approach, we can really maybe have a radical different results from our action. So what they do now is they launch a test, they collect data. They build a customer profile, they learn about the customer, they're focused on the customer, and from learning about the customer, that gives them some more questions. What else they want to know about the customers? They go to their agency, they say, here's what else we want to learn about the customer. The agency builds some creative, some control, some treatments. They test more, they learn more, and they continually to dive deeper into the customer. So as we left off our story, things weren't looking too good for Whirlpool and Thomas Mender, but look, after that, huge increase in click-through rates, huge decrease in opt-outs. Small changes can have a very big impact. Let's get into some more changes. And another, I think, email summit attendee, right?
She was. Marcia Oakes of calendars.com attended Email Summit 2013, and she made it her goal to come back, and she said, we didn't know how we were going to do it, but we were going to win an award the next year, and they did. They were one of our email award winners transferring from promotional emails to developing some content marketing. So calendars.com is a highly seasonal product. They send 50 million messages every year, and 50% of those are sent just over 3 months. So for half the year, they struggle with engagement and developing compelling content. And we actually, Laura, who's a Western District Sales Manager, asked, what is the most common reason why email newsletters end up in company spam folders? So the problem that calendars.com was having was because they were so seasonal, they were having engagement ups and downs, unsubscribe rates, and drastically inconsistent email volume. So they decided that during the off season, in order to level out their numbers a little, they were going to develop a voice and do some content marketing that wasn't their usual promotional emails. So they developed a newsletter. So this was a new undertaking for them. So they had to sit down and decide, what is the time commitment that we're going to need? And more importantly, where are we going to get this content from? So their first step was to develop some content to pull from. And through that, they developed some evergreen content that they already had, and then they developed a great content calendar to plan out their resources. So Stephanie, a marketing intern, asked us, can you have too much content? Well, it's all really about your audience and understanding what they need and what they can take. So what calendars.com did is they decided we're going to take a lot of content, but we're going to make it manageable. And so they put it into a calendar grid that allowed them to kind of reinforce their brand and without it being too cartoony or childish. And they put a bunch of content from their blog, their Pinterest, their Facebook, and their website. They put it all into this one easily digestible newsletter. So each month has a theme. This one is August, it's back to school, and so they have theme days, school morning time savers. They have interesting dates in history, so Hawaii becomes a state in 1959. That leads back to their website for their Hawaiian calendars. Celebrity birthdays, that leads back to their blog. And organizational tips on their Pinterest, and really popular, it would link directly to a really popular pin. So after they sent this out, they see a huge blog traffic increase after the flip day send. They also saw, it actually ended up producing a positive ROI, which they weren't expecting. They were doing this just to kind of interact with customers, and saw a 71% increase in open rate. And more anecdotally, they got some really great customer feedback.
Yeah, as I was saying before, this webinar is sponsored by ExactTarget and their partner DEG. So let me tell you about DEG briefly. DEG is a full-service digital consultancy creating smart digital marketing, commerce, and collaboration strategies. The firm provides email and eCRM, integrated e-commerce, social media, enterprise collaboration, web content strategy, analytics, paid media, and mobile development services. They've been honored multiple times as the industry's best place to work, and DEG can be found online at degdigital.com. And also, I know a lot of people will tweet to our sponsors. They are at DEG Digital if you want to tweet to them and thank them for sponsoring today, or you can tweet to ExactTarget. Also, as we talked about, Thomas Mender and Marcia Oakes, both of them attended an email summit. Then we wrote a case study about them. Then they spoke at an email summit. All of this information we're sharing today is case studies from marketers like you. If you have a case study you'd like to share, email us at editor@marketingsherpa.com. And before we get to lesson 3, stand out in the inbox, we have a question here from Megan Sampson. We realize 77% said go fast, 23% said go slow. So if we're going too fast for you, tweet to us, #SherpaWebinar. We'll dive a little deeper into some of these things. Megan wants to know, as email design is very restrictive for responsive, what is the best way to design for mobile/multiple devices? devices. Megan, we have some slides in here from Justine Jordan of Litmus, and she got into this a little bit. She advocates going mobile first. So responsive design, that's a technology, and there are ways to use that. But if you're not able to get into responsive design and use that technology, think of some of the best practices that would look good on a desktop or, as you say, on any device. Some of those things are, take a good look at how much text you're using, take a good look at how you're doing links. If you have a lot of text and there's a blue link right next to it, it's probably going to be hard to click on a mobile device, so make sure you're giving plenty of space, maybe big, bright, clickable buttons, very visual. Some of those things can help with a mobile-first approach, thinking of how does it look not only on a desktop computer, but any device. And you can download these slides at slideshare.net/marketingsherpa and take a look at some of Justine's best practices if we aren't able to get to them today. But with that, tell us how to stand out in the inbox, Courtney.
All right, so here we're going to talk about Dave Sirk from Dell. They took some old technology and they used it to launch one of their new products. So we have a question from Brittany, who's an email programs manager. What is the coolest new thing in email execution? What's next? Cool tools, abilities. So what Dell did was they took a kind of retro design element and they adapted it to fit their new product. So Dell does about a couple of product launches a year, mostly their new laptops. So it's kind of tough to get people excited about a new laptop, especially, that's what they're expecting from Dell. But Dave Sirk's team was really excited about this new product, their convertible Ultrabook, which goes from being a laptop to a tablet. The only problem they faced was it's kind of difficult to explain. So it's different pictures don't really cut it. You don't really exactly understand what the product does. They need too much text in the email to explain it. You have 2 seconds to grab someone's attention, and that just wasn't going to work. So they decided to reach back to an element. And when you think of email marketing and GIFs, or as Dan likes to say, GIFs, you think of these kind of hideous things from the 90s. But what they did was they realized we can use one of these things to show our value proposition almost immediately to customers, and they will get it. And so what they did was they did a repeating animation for a couple of seconds in the time frame. They don't need that much copy. I open up the email and I automatically understand why I would want this product and what it does. And so Dell saw a 109% increase in revenue compared to their benchmark data from the previous year using this and really clearly explaining their value proposition.
How do you, potato, GIFs, how do you pronounce it? You can tweet to us, #SherpaWebinar, let us know how you pronounce it. Settle the debate between me and Courtney. Let's get into the next lesson. Question your assumptions. Everyone on the call today, everyone watching this webinar has assumptions about what they think works, what they think their audience wants. Sometimes you got to get out of the box a little and question those. We had Chris Halver from the Tenant Company come out, and the Tenant Company, they sell floor cleaners, right? It's a very B2B audience, very staid, very manufacturing based, sounds very boring. He wanted to take it up a notch, try a little creativity, see if it worked for his audience. So not only try a little creativity, they were barely even using email, so try to get some email out there. He is a big motorcycle fan, and he came on stage. He actually had his motorcycle vest underneath. Courtney loved this. He had his motorcycle vest underneath his suit jacket, took off the suit jacket, and was just who he is, a guy who likes motorcycles, which really brings home the point. When we're talking about B2B, we might be talking to business, but there's companies behind those businesses. Chris, for example, works for a company. He's a motorcycle enthusiast. He's a person behind that. How are you talking to the actual people at those companies? So what they tried was a bit of a motorcycle enthusiast-based approach. As you can see, hardcore riders for hard floors. That might not seem very radical for most of you, but for a very stodgy B2B lead gen, manufacturing-based company, that could be a big way of jumping out of their assumptions. Here was the landing page design. You can see there's even some racing stripes on these floor cleaners. So let's get into how they did this. They tested their way into it, right? So here's an example. We have a question from Stephanie. She's a marketing intern. She wants to know about compelling subject lines. Let's take a look at how they tried some different subject lines when they were taking this little more radical approach for them. The traditional one was they had the product names in there, the Tenant B10, the T12, whatever. The non-traditional one, they just started with "wanna ride." And so that was very non-traditional for them. And then they tried a hybrid approach where it said take a ride on the wild side, they also had their company name in there as well. And let's take a look at the results. 24.2% relative difference increase for that approach where they also included the company name in here. And this is why it's important to question our assumptions, but also to test our way into it. Because if you look, just the radical approach, again for them, the radical approach for you will likely be different, of not having the company name in there, they actually saw a decrease. It was a 6.5% decrease. So by combining the new approach with what they've been doing before, that's where they saw the increase. And that to the question is where you can find some compelling subject lines, try some new things, learn about your customer, and actually test to see what works. But as with Whirlpool, this was just one campaign. It really transformed their entire effort. By seeing the results from that test, by seeing some of the results from trying something new, it really opened their eyes. They questioned more assumptions. They focused on their solutions, not on their products. They focused on new and creative ideas, and most importantly, customer benefits and advantages. And the results were more qualified leads, more product revenue, overall a better return on their marketing investment. And I think the biggest takeaway there is sit down with your team. What are you assuming about your customer? What do you really know? And how much can you change? So one thing we assume is when we need information in a lead gen form, we ask for all that information in that lead gen form, right? So we end up having some very big lead gen forms. But here, Ken, a marketing manager, wants to know examples of good B2B emails. And coming up, we have the Best in Show winner in the lead gen category, Byron Odell of IHS. Very awesome campaign. There's a lot of things we can talk about, but I want to talk about those lead gen forms. And that's a real challenge when you're doing what Byron does, is switching from the traditional batch and blast approach to an automated approach. Let's take a look. This was the automated drip approach that he set up in their marketing automation platform. Because not only was it automated, but it was also very segmented. It was around specific personas. And when you segment, you do need those lead gen forms. You do need that information. But to get the information in a way that works for the customer, they had to change not just the technology and how they were asking, they had to change their culture, right? Platform, a lead gen form is just a piece of technology, but the way we use it is the culture in our company. So one thing they did to change is they simply added this. They said, what is your current role? And you can see, I think there are 6 or 7 roles here. By knowing that role-based information, they were able to segment. But the really interesting thing about this form is, one, it's short, which we're going to get into in a minute, but also there's more information they can get than just the information they're asking. They call this a tip of the iceberg approach, right? So that at the top of the iceberg is the information they're asking. At the bottom is information they can get from databases and they can get from different services to, for example, here's an autofill. When someone types in lock in the beginning of their company, they can suggest different companies like Lockheed Martin, Lock Solid. Just makes it that much easier for someone to get through the friction of filling the form and actually fill that form out. What they were able to do with this information, we have a question here from Rupert. He's a director. He wants to know about marketing automation and hyper-personalization. Here's the way they were able to personalize in their marketing automation platform. They had different newsletters with customizable content blocks, and based on the persona, those 7 different personas, they could customize those content blocks with information that was relevant to that audience. So when they sent that information out, it was, again, based on the information they had. And here's how they really changed their lead gen forms. You can see the before on the left and the after on the right. That's radically different, right? They shrunk their form from 15 fields to 7 fields, and this is the way they did it. They gated the content that they were sending out. So as you saw, those persona-based emails that led people to some gated content where then they can ask for more information. By using progressive profiling, they were able to pre-fill some of those forms and ask for a little bit more information each time. In this case, they auto-filled some information. They asked for address. So if you need to find out a lot of information about your customers, don't ask for it all up front. Take them through a process. That's the great thing about email. You're not just hitting someone once. You're having a conversation with them, a relationship with them, once they give you that email address. And over time, you can build up your knowledge about them. And then at the end of the day, they test it as well. But that's one way. Another way to learn more about the customer, not even to ask for it in the lead gen form, but to see what information you have that can relate to what information you get. And our next case study was a really cool way of doing that.
Yeah, we have our other Best in Show and our e-commerce Best in Show, Eventful. And so Herb, who is the CMO, asked, will any of these case studies be relevant for B2C campaigns? Well, here we have our Best in Show for e-commerce. And so what Eventful wanted to do was to take they wanted to recreate the record store recommendation ways that you could discover new music. And so they put together all the ways that these top 4 methods, popularity, categorization, sponsorship, staff picks, but they fell short on the last one, fans like you. So they decided that that works the best, and they wanted to be able to tap into the trust that fans have for other fans. That feedback is valuable information to the Eventful users. So they were making recommendations based on what users had explicitly told them about themselves, but they needed to connect areas of untapped data that they had to create new relevance for their consumers. So they needed to pull together the data that would allow them to do 30 or 40 things based on 1 or 2 pieces of key information. So what they did was take one piece of information, like a person's favorite band is Radiohead, and then pepper it with other information like they also like Radiohead. And to infuse that relevancy, they would populate information from the 50,000 other users who also like those 2 bands and say, based off of those 50,000 other people who like Radiohead and Arcade Fire, you will probably also like these bands from Muse all the way to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and make relevant recommendations that way. So what they developed is this beautiful force graph that shows all the different genres of music. So you can see our example performers in the user preference. So there's a lot of fan overlap that are pulled together so the bands are pulled together kind of like gravity and form this natural grouping in this web. And so when we get closer, we can see how bands similar to Radiohead and Arcade Fire group together naturally based on data. So you can see several other performers that they're able to predict that Radiohead and Arcade Fire fans might like. So they have this powerful data, so they had to ask themselves, what do we do with it? We have all of this, how do we put it together? So they needed to entice their fans on the homepage, give them opportunities to say, I want to see Kings of Leon with Gary Clark Jr., I want to see Katy Perry. They asked users if they wanted to be notified about upcoming events. They integrated these demanded elements to have users tell them, how many other people had demanded that band be in their town. And in the emails, they asked them, again, what performers do you like? Add Radiohead, add the Black Keys. And finally, they gamified the registration process to make gathering information simple, easy for people to interact. But what if you don't have this technology? Eventful was pulling from 10 years of data that they'd been collecting. So this campaign is really all about utilizing the data that you do have. So first, don't bother people with forms. Gain insight from the behavior-based activities that you have on your site and start spreading those opportunities to get information from people gradually across all of your platforms. Don't force people to give up information only at certain points. Make it easy to interact with you all the time. So let's take this idea to a different company, IKEA. So keep your initial form fields to a minimum and learn really only what you have to kind of build the relationship up over time, make it steady. So infer what you know, and based off of that information, ask thoughtful questions that you can gradually build off of. And constantly encourage and offer every opportunity you can for customers to tell you more. And this actually displays a point by one of our keynotes, Dr. Noah Goldstein. He said drawing attention to a head start is an effective data building strategy because saying a customer has 20% profile completeness encourages them to finish the task rather than leaving it unfinished.
Because you feel like you lost something if you leave. I already got 20% through the process. I don't want to leave now.
It worked with me in LinkedIn, so. So here's the current version of Eventful's recommended performer alerts emails that were, the product of collecting all of this information. So their subject line utilizes a familiar artist's name, and then once you're in there, it gives you, tell us who you like and receive alerts about these people. And so not only can you use social sharing if you're happy about this, but they also give you a way to correct the information without unsubscribing. I'm not interested in Arcade Fire, but I still want to receive Eventful emails. And then you have the recommended artist, and you can confirm, this is correct, I like Arcade Fire, send me alerts about Vampire Weekend. Give me as many opportunities as you possibly can to interact with you. So Marianne, who's a business owner, asked us, I'm interested in when is too much, when is too little when sending emails. So what Eventful was doing by collecting this information was increasing the amount of times that they interact with their email subscribers, but doing it with relevance. So if you're sending 1,000 emails that don't mean anything to your subscribers, you're going to get unsubscribes. But if you're sending relevant emails, they're going to interact with you all the more. And Eventful saw 400% reactivation of inactive subscribers using relevancy and a 12% increase in site visits.
Yeah, so people on #StripWebinar have been tweeting GIF or GIF, and here's one of my favorites from Manaz Wolf. He says, I pronounce it like the peanut butter GIF drives the designers crazy. Thanks, Manaz. We also have a question here on #StripWebinar from Megan Sampson. Best practices for send times and days of the week are always evolving. Any new learnings for 2014? Great webinar, by the way. Thanks, Megan. So I think the biggest new learning for 2014, not necessarily brand new, but like we were talking about with Eventful, like we were talking about with IHS, this technology that allows you to personalize, that allows you to segment, that allows you to essentially send the things to people when they want those things. For example, with Eventful, when a band's coming to your town, or when people take action on your website or take another action, I mean, that is really the most effective thing to do, to be relevant when people take that action. As for send times in general, the traditional things we've always seen, weekend, probably not the best for a business customer. During business hours, probably not the best for a consumer customer. But it really comes down to testing it for your own audience, because your audience is going to be unique. Try it at different times, run some split tests, and see what works best. But another way of being relevant is also being relevant to what's going on actually in society. And that's what this B2B marketer did, Christine Nurnberger from SunGuard Availability Services. She tied into zombies, which is not something we normally think about for a B2B company. But here's where the relevance was. It was right for her audience. They were IT people. And World War Z was coming out. So we have a question here from Mackenzie. She's a junior marketing advisor. What is the most effective way for you to come up with a subject line? Well, sometimes it's to do what David Meerman Scott calls newsjacking and look at what's going on in society. So she created this overall campaign that split it out for C-level. She also reached out to analysts and PR. She had her main email list that she split into her cloud availability services. That's one of the solutions that SunGuard provides. And that's why the zombies make so much sense, right? Zombies might not make sense for everything we were talking about, might not have made sense for Eventful or IHS for you watching today, but SunGuard Availability Services, they care about cloud availability services and they care about IT disaster recovery. So the types of things that happen when really bad stuff happens sometimes, right? Like Superstorm Sandy, like hurricanes, and like also a zombie apocalypse. They're here to say, we're going to make sure your IT still works, we're going to make sure the cloud is still working. That's why it ties in. So they ran this overall campaign. They also retargeted their inactive subscribers. And this is where, what we used to call in the agency days, this idea really had legs. So when you're looking for an out-of-the-box idea, even if you're a B2B audience, like Christine had right here, because again, B2B, there's still people working at those companies, make sure that idea has legs. And here's an example of how it did. For their reactives, they say, still alive. Ties perfectly into zombies. They reactivated 2% of those contacts who had not interacted in 6 months. They also tied in a landing page with this fun zombie survival kit, right? They tried to make it fun overall, not just overall company solution, company product. Make it a little fun for the customer, but tie into the overall value prop of that company. So they had a zombie survival kit with different things that also included information about the company, of course. People were able to sign up to register for this kit. Also for the C-level executives, they just sent the kit to them directly. They got a lot of, not surprisingly, social media shares, went a little viral on Facebook and Twitter. They also sent this flash drive. It was really fun to the C-level executives. So they segmented who are our really high-value audience. And that's a great way to use email. Think about email as part of an overall campaign. They use direct mail for the C-level executives, the big-time purchasers. They use email for the bigger audience. And this was part of that C-level executive campaign, this fun flash drive that was personalized to them. And then they followed up on that flash drive with a message in the video that said, hey, watch out for the zombie apocalypse. We're going to help you with this overall zombie survival guide and zombie packet. Overall, they saw some pretty good results, increase in click-to-open rate. But really, the fundamental thing that you have to learn, and I think the biggest takeaway from the overall webinar is, how do you best tell your story, right? So when you're looking for that out-of-the-box idea, when you're looking for something maybe really clever, you have to ask these 3 questions. Can it communicate the right message? For SunGard, this communicated the right message. A zombie apocalypse, they're an IT uptime company. They're able to say, even in a worst case scenario, we're going to make sure your IT is still running. So what is that message for you? Whether it's something creative like SunGard did, or a more straightforward, very clear message, how do you communicate that? Can it reach the right audience? Their audience was IT related, zombies worked for them. What does your audience care about? If they're CFOs, maybe they don't want anything creative. Maybe they just want to know the numbers. They want a clear expression of the numbers. And can it communicate it in a way that will resonate with our audience? So you got the message, you got the audience. Is it really going to work for them? Resonate in some ways means that, hey, it goes viral, they're going to want to share it. But resonate also means they just take an action. They click on that email they want to buy. Hopefully this webinar resonated with you. Unfortunately, we are all out of time. That's our 30 minutes. We tried to smush 14 and a half hours into the time we had. Unfortunately, we didn't get to each and every slide. You can go to slideshare.net/marketingsherpa to see all of the slides. Thank you for watching, and you can go to marketingsherpa.com to read some of these case studies. Thanks for your time, folks.
Thanks.